20 years ago this month, Deborah Johnson was the news director here at WFSB. She was the one who guided our coverage of the 9/11 attacks. She has since retired to the West Coast, but is joining us today to reflect on that day and the following days. Welcome, Deborah. It's great to be with you.
Cara, it's great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Well, I got to say thank you and let our viewers know. Thank you first for you were the one who hired me here more than 20 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Well, look how well everybody's doing.
Exactly. Now, I want to go back to that day because I'll just say personally, I'll never forget seeing your face as I walked into the newsroom and the second plane hit the towers. You may not remember this, but I was watching it behind you, and I felt like you were the one who processed it for me because in that second, you understood we were under attack. What do you recall about that moment or that day?
It was a Tuesday. Tuesdays were always department head meetings at Channel 3. And I was in the conference room waiting for it to begin when our executive producer, Tom Lowell, came screaming down the hall saying a plane had crashed into the World Trade Tower, And it was like 2 seconds of what? And then we all jumped up and ran down to the newsroom and looking at it, and then seeing a second plane, I realized this was just not an accident. I mean, one plane, yeah, an accident perhaps, but not two. And then, of course, went on from there with the two other planes.
Yeah, and your job that day was not only to make sure we all told the story, but to keep all of us safe. I mean, what was going through your mind as you're thinking, which in journalism happens in seconds, what do we do next?
Well, clearly there were two sides of my brain working. One was the people side. Is everyone okay? Are we all safe? The other is the business side. Okay, we've got to cover this story. This is a Connecticut story as much as it is anything else. Plus, the world is changing right in front of us. So what do we have to do? So it was a matter of, excuse the expression, rallying the troops and assigning people to literally get to New York as fast as they could. I remember one of the crews got stuck at one of the bridges, so couldn't even leave Connecticut. So that was part of it. And then, of course, watching everything unfold through the networks, as well as keeping in touch with people who are on the ground trying to get there, as well as dealing with the people in the newsroom, some of whom were very young and were totally, use the expression, freaked out. Totally. I mean, we all were to a point. But it wasn't hysteria. It was like, okay, we all know what we have to do, but oh my God.
Right. No, I mean, I was one of those young people and, of course, looking to you and others for direction. I remember hopping on the train. You had said, I need you to go to the hospitals. We're going to have injured people coming. And that was not the case. We didn't have any. And that very next morning, our photographer, Eric Hurst, and I were at a train station, and a group of firefighters from Fairfield was heading straight to Ground Zero to try and help. And we made the decision, let's just hop on the train and we'll call Deborah from the train. And if she really doesn't want us to, we'll get off the train. But you told us it was okay, go on. And, I think it was just about exactly what we said, like, how can we cover this story? And you having the big picture, how do we tell this story? And then are we okay to just go to Ground Zero, which we would ultimately stay there some 2 weeks?
Right. It was a case of not so much having the right, there was only one place to be really, and that was Ground Zero. So it was a matter of getting positioned there and in a way, maybe getting more people than we really needed, so to speak, knowing full well the networks are going to cover that end of it. But the Connecticut connection was so huge because people commuted to New York City from, as far away as Stonington. So it wasn't as if this was going to be some foreign place to us. This was our backyard. And we had to represent. We had to be there. And we did, I think, an amazing job with people like you in the field and the photographers and the engineers dealing with your emotions, but also knowing you had a job to do and balancing that. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, it was answering the phones because people didn't know who to call. So who do they call? The TV station.
Yep.
Answering the phones, knowing full well we had no more information than the caller did, but that we would try. And it was, that day is a big blur in a way, because it was a matter of just taking everything in and waiting to see, after the other two planes crashed, waiting to see, okay, is there something else? And that was very unsettling.
Right, not knowing what was going to come next and having your people there. I recall sometimes there were people crying in the edit bays, seeing the unfiltered footage come in of sometimes people jumping off the towers and you having to help the staff process. What was that like?
Some of it is reminding people that we're still human and we have a job to do, and it's not an easy job. And no one expects you not to have emotions. But if you can possibly do it, separate it out a little bit. If you need to get up out of your chair and take a walk and go around the building, whatever it needs, you need to go to the bathroom, just something to get your head right a little bit, and then come back knowing full well you have, quote, a job to do. But we're there to support you.
Yes.
If you need to take a break, scream it out. We'll take care of you.
I was lucky to work under someone like you. You were always journalism with a capital J, get the facts, tell the story correctly, writing. I mean, some of that stuff we had to do the best we could because it was happening so quickly. But I'm curious on a personal level, at some point we all had those moments where after we were off the air, after we've done making the decisions, you had that moment. Did you have a moment where it just all hit you?
I don't think it came till later. One of the things that I did do, I think especially because we had, with our interns and production assistants, a lot of young people, and there was a lot of stress and confusion and emotion. And so I contacted a counselor through one of our local hospitals and asked them to come in, and they came in the early evening, and I let people know, here's someone to talk to. We can talk in groups or whatever. And a group of people, I would say, I'm guessing now, trying to remember, maybe 6 to 8 people came into the conference room and just sat, and some talked and some didn't. But I do remember one, I don't remember if it was an intern or production assistant, a young guy, probably in college, just sitting there with his head in his hands, saying, why do they hate us? Why do they hate us? And I still have that image in my mind as, from my point of view, I grew up after World War II, but I was still, in the throes of the Cold War, then Vietnam. And so I had a little of that in me, that memory, my parents, talking with them. And so for this young man, he had nothing to relate to. This sort of, to him, came out of the blue. People hate us. I hate to say it, but yeah, they do. And that we're going to get through this. It was a blur. It was very much moments of high intensity, moments of like, oh my God, and just keep going.
Mm-hmm. I know you've been out of the news business for some time now, but always a journalist and still writing. What is it like for you now as we come up on 20 years? Is there anything you do to mark this day in general, or anything you will do as we approach this 20th anniversary?
Well, on the one hand, it's not that I'm crazy to see the images again, although they're there every day. On the other hand, I will be watching, excuse me, both network news and our local news out here, because everybody has a story. There's a story behind every image. And I still want to hear those stories. I don't want to forget those stories because the images stay in your mind. For instance, watching that first plane leave the airport in Afghanistan and some people hanging on the airplane and then dropping off as the plane took off. What was the image in my mind? The World Trade Center and people jumping out the window. So that doesn't leave you.
Right.
It doesn't leave you.
And you were here at a time where we were all in the field and it was chaotic, and maybe we were more calling in for guidance or who's getting what. But you were actually in the newsroom having to run the show. And, for our viewers, I think it will be interesting at that point. Denise DeCenzo was still our main evening anchor. I'm so sad that we've lost her. But what was it like, and what kind of Denise was always such a calming force. A lot of people in Connecticut remember the speech she gave after the attacks. But what was it like from that perspective in the newsroom, dealing with Denise and the other anchors?
There were two levels. There was the emotional level of everyone trying to hold it together and everyone trying to do his or her job. And, having a presence like Denise, there is nothing else like that. A leader, a calming presence. Yes, I need the latest information and I need it now. But at the same time, exuding the confidence that we will all get through this. And I saw that as part of my role too. It was a matter of making sure from the business point of view, we had our people in place. We had the best people, and we always had the best people, so it didn't matter. But we had the best people where they needed to be, in New York, at the train stations, at the hospitals, at the fire stations, wherever they needed to be to tell the story. But also to be able to have them communicate back to us off air. How are you doing? Are you okay? What can we do? You want to come home? Nobody wanted to come home. As stressful and as emotional as it was, nobody wanted to come home. They were going to be there to tell the story, to bring our viewers what they needed to know, no matter what it took. And I'm proud that I was able to work with such a devoted group of people, some of whom are gone, some of whom I know are still there, and the rest of us are scattered around. And it's one of those seminal moments. It's nothing I think of every day, but as we get closer, a lot of things remind me of what it's like to work with a group of people who are all pulling for the same reason. Nothing to do with ego at this point. It was all to do with service. What can we tell our viewers? What can we tell them now? How can we reassure them if there's anything to be reassured about? And that was a big moment.
Thank you. And it was wonderful to have a leader like you who instilled those higher values of journalism in us. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to see you. Say hi to everyone.
I will. Thank you, Deborah. We all miss you, and thank you for sharing some time and letting everyone, even those who are too young to even have been alive that are watching this, just what that day was really like.
I'll be looking for the pieces on your digital platform.
You will see them there. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.